Hello, my name is Bill Keach. I work for Sunbelt Computer Software, and today I'd like to talk about a new object released in 10.5 named the data table. The data table is an object that provides the POB language with a means of loading, storing, and manipulating a table of data that is maintained and referenced using a row and column orientation. This allows us to access the data as if it was a spreadsheet. This also gives us dynamic memory. It is a server-side object, so that the performance can be increased while using the application server or the web server. It supports transactions so that as you change data inside the table, you can commit it, roll back, or just step back one action at a time. There's also multiple ways to view the data, as both a list view or an enhanced list view or a series of cards. But let's go ahead and take a look at a program so that it's a little bit more self-explanatory. So the first program we're going to look at is a program that just handles transactions, just to give you an idea about the transaction capability of the data table. We'll bring it up under the debugger. We will step into the program, hiding the main window, and you'll see it's very simple to create a data table. You just do create. Now, because we're going to be looking at it in a list view type form, I've turned striping on, and at the same time I've also turned on transactions. We will load a simple form up. We'll actually set up the actual table. So in the table, we're going to give a page size because a table in the list view can have be paged. A context, we're going to not allow multiple selections, and we're going to turn grid lines on. Then we're just basically going to add 4 columns, starting at number 0. 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. Very easy to add. Then we're going to set a little bit of property about the columns. We're going to end up setting the title, giving it a width, alignment, and we're going to make all the columns but the last one editable. We will then commit those changes, because if we did not commit those changes and we did a rollback, it would actually take the table back to its initial form. And then we're going to connect it up to a HTML control. Tables can produce HTML in various styles, and you don't need to have any kind of visual aspect to a data table, but in this case it makes sense that we have a visual aspect. And then we'll wait for the first event. Now, looking at the program, we'll see that we have a nice presentation here. We have a number of buttons that allow us to add a record, delete a record, undo an action, commit, or roll back. So in this case, let's add the first record. And we'll see that we're calling a function called add record. Now, we will step into that, see what add record does. What he does is he gets the property of whatever the active row is, and then he basically just calls add a row. And then he returns. And we return, go back to the wait event, and when we take a look, we see that we've added a row that contains an identity number and a spot for both the name, an address, and a phone number. Now, at this point, we could continue along, and actually, to make this a little bit quicker, let's add a breakpoint to deleting record, undoing an action, performing a rollback, and performing a commit. In this case, we'll say go. And we will come down here. We'll type in bill. We will go to this next one, and we will say 233 Dark Street, 555-1212. Oh, that was 11212. So I could do an undo. And just by calling undo, it knows whatever the last transaction was that was done. In this case, it actually does the phone number. If I pressed undo again, it would remove the street address. Or for example, if I didn't like the entire record, I could just hit rollback. In this case, by just calling rollback, it'll reset the last time there was a commit or rollback. So we go back here and we run. Then we see it's removed the entire record. In this case, let's add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 records. Call this one bill. Say commit. And what happens is this will commit all 5 records to be inside the table. So we'll take that breakpoint off. We'll take that breakpoint off. That breakpoint. And we'll leave the delete record. But let's disable the breakpoint for the moment. Bring back the program. And you can see in this case, we could do something like reselect this record, delete it, and then we could roll it back, and there it pops back in again. So what happens is you were able to manipulate records and data and changes, and yet have a very simple mechanism to have the runtime automatically track everything that's going on. So that shows a little bit about the transactioning. And I briefly like to talk about the next 2 programs, which are a little bit more sophisticated. This one right here, called DATATABLE List View, actually goes and shows the various events that you can have and contains a much more sophisticated list view that loads up a series of data. So we'll give this a quick run to show what it looks like. In this case, you can see we can have striping, multiple different types. You can set up columns to sort. You can end up being able to change data. You can see the eventing. You can see that we have paging. You can go back and forth through the table. Then the sorting understands everything. So what happens is that we have a much more sophisticated list view now that's being backed by a data table. And on an application server using a client, the data is all at the server, and only the client receives the HTML that is needed to render it, meaning that you can now have a list view that has 1,000 records, but just show the records 10 or 25 at a time automatically without needing any programming intervention. I will run the 3rd program as well, which just shows a Bootstrap 5 type card layout. Once again, this is also something that's fairly easy to do and allows us to take a data table, and instead of showing it as a list view, we show it as a series of cards. So we can use data tables to be able to have a series of different presentations through the data. In the future, we hope to do charting, other types of data, representation, as you see, all based off of this server-side data table. Well, hopefully I've piqued your interest in looking at the data tables, and please leave comments about what you'd like to see or whether you'd like to see anything more. And I hope you have a good day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.